The morning sun rose over New Haven like it had for 30 years. The colony looked peaceful from space. Farms stretched across the green valleys. Small cities dotted the landscape. Children were getting ready for school. Parents were heading to work. Nobody knew that this would be their last normal day. Commander Jake Morrison was drinking his coffee at the orbital defense platform. He was watching the morning reports when his screen started flashing red. His hand froze halfway to his mouth. Ships were coming out of hyperspace. Not one or two. Hundreds of them. Jake hit the alarm button. The peaceful morning shattered with warning sirens. He tried to send a message to the incoming fleet. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they were lost. His communication request got no answer. Instead, the lead ship powered up its weapons. The first missile hit the defense platform 3 seconds later. Jake was thrown across the room. Alarms screamed everywhere. He could smell smoke and burning metal. He pulled himself up and ran to the emergency console. He had to warn Earth. He had to tell them what was happening. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He recorded everything. The ships were Krethian. Everyone knew about the Krethians. They were a reptilian species that loved war. But there had been peace treaties. There were diplomatic channels. This made no sense. Jake sent the message just as another explosion rocked the platform. He looked out the window and saw the Krethian fleet spreading out. They were surrounding the planet. This was not a raid. This was an invasion. No, it was worse than that. This was extermination. Down on the surface, Lisa Morgan was walking her daughter to school. Amy was 8 years old and carrying a backpack covered in star stickers. She was talking about her science project. Lisa was only half listening. She was thinking about the city council meeting later that day. Then the sirens started. Lisa stopped walking. Amy looked up at her with confused eyes. The sirens meant danger. They meant everyone should go to the shelters. But New Haven had never needed the shelters before. They were just there as a precaution. Lisa grabbed Amy's hand and started running. Other people were running too. Everyone was heading toward the nearest shelter. Lisa's communicator started buzzing. It was an emergency message. Enemy ships in orbit. Bombing would begin soon. Get to safety. They made it to the shelter just as the first bombs fell. The ground shook. Amy screamed and Lisa held her tight. The shelter was filling up fast. Families pressed together in the dark. Someone turned on emergency lights. Children were crying. Adults were trying to stay calm. Lisa was the civilian administrator for this district. People looked to her for answers. She had no answers to give. Her communicator showed reports coming in from all over the planet. The Krethians were bombing everything. Cities, farms, even small villages. Nothing was being spared. Captain Greg Sullivan commanded the Colony Defense Force. He had 50 soldiers and 12 armored vehicles. Against hundreds of warships, it meant nothing. But he was not going to sit and hide. He ordered his people to set up defensive positions around the evacuation centers. Greg watched the Krethian dropships coming down through the smoke. They were landing troops. This was not just bombing. They were going to make sure nobody survived. He raised his rifle. Around him, his soldiers did the same. They all knew they were going to die. But they would buy time for the civilians. The first Krethian soldiers came around the corner. They were tall and covered in scales. Their eyes were cold and yellow. Greg opened fire. His squad joined in. The Krethians fell back, surprised by resistance. But more were coming. So many more. In the shelter, Lisa was organizing people. The colony had transport ships at the spaceport. If they could get there, some people might escape. She needed volunteers to go check if the path was clear. 20 people stepped forward. Lisa wanted to go with them, but she had to stay with Amy. The volunteers left through the back exit. Lisa watched them go and prayed they would make it. She turned back to the frightened crowd. She saw elderly people holding hands. She saw parents protecting their children. She saw her whole world dying around her. Hours passed. The bombing continued. The shelter shook with each impact. Then Lisa's communicator buzzed. It was the volunteers. The path to the spaceport was clear. The ships were still there. They could evacuate, but they had to move now. Lisa stood up and raised her voice. Everyone who could walk needed to move. They would go in groups. The elderly and children first. Everyone else would follow. They had one chance to survive. They had to take it. The evacuation began. Lisa moved people out in waves. She counted heads. She made sure nobody was left behind. Outside, she could see fires burning across the city. The sky was dark with smoke. Explosions lit up the horizon. New Haven was dying. Amy held her mother's hand tight as they ran through the streets. Bodies lay everywhere. Buildings were collapsed. The beautiful colony was turning into a graveyard. They reached the spaceport and Lisa saw the ships. 5 transport vessels. Maybe they could save 5,000 people. Out of 2 million, Lisa started loading people onto the ships. She worked fast. Every second counted. The Krathians would find the spaceport soon. She put families together. She made sure children were not separated from parents. The ships filled up quickly. Then she heard the sound she had been dreading. Krathian dropships overhead. They had found the spaceport. Lisa looked at the transports. They were full but not launched yet. She looked at Amy. Then she made her decision. She picked up Amy and ran to the nearest transport. She pushed her daughter inside and grabbed a stranger's arm. "Take care of her," she said. The woman nodded. Amy started crying and reaching for her mother. Lisa stepped back. The door started closing. Amy screamed for her. Lisa ran to the control tower. She had to launch the ships manually. Someone had to stay behind to do it. She reached the controls and started the launch sequence. The first ship lifted off. Then the second. Krathian soldiers were pouring into the spaceport now. The third ship launched. The fourth. Lisa could hear weapons fire getting closer. Just one more ship. The fifth transport started to rise. A Krathian appeared in the doorway behind her. Lisa did not turn around. She kept her hand on the controls until the ship cleared the atmosphere. In the transport, Amy pressed her face against the window. She watched New Haven getting smaller below. She saw the fires. She saw the explosions. She saw her home dying. The woman who promised to take care of her held her close. But nothing could stop Amy's tears. The 5 ships jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, the Krathians continued their work. They bombed every city. They destroyed every farm. They left nothing standing. When they were done, New Haven was gone. 2.3 million people dead, 40,000 escaped. It was the worst massacre in human history. 2 days later, the distress signal reached Earth. Admiral Henry Blake was in his office when he got the alert. He opened the file and started watching. His face went pale. His hands started shaking. He had to watch it 3 times before he could believe it was real. The recording showed everything. Krathian ships bombing hospitals, soldiers shooting fleeing civilians, children being hunted through the streets. This was not war. This was genocide. Pure and calculated genocide. Admiral Blake walked to the window. He looked out at Earth. Safe, peaceful, beautiful. He thought about New Haven. He thought about the families who died there. He thought about what the Krathians had done, and he knew that humanity's response would shake the galaxy to its core. President Catherine Hayes stood before the Emergency Council. The room was silent except for the sound of breathing. Nobody wanted to speak first. Everyone had watched the recordings from New Haven. Everyone had seen what the Krathians did. Admiral Blake stood up. He cleared his throat. "We have 3 options," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. "We can launch a conventional military response. We can target their military bases with limited strikes, or we can activate Option 0. The room stayed quiet. Everyone knew about Option 0. It was a protocol that had only existed in theory. Nobody thought it would ever be used. It was the darkest plan humanity had ever created, a plan that went beyond war into something else entirely. President Hayes looked around the table. "What exactly is Option 0?" she asked. She knew the answer, but she wanted everyone to hear it said out loud. Admiral Blake pulled up a display. The screen showed technical diagrams and weapon specifications. "For 30 years we have been building weapons in secret," Blake said. "We have programs that nobody knows about. Not our allies. Not our enemies. We created them because we knew that someday humanity might face extinction. We needed insurance." He changed the display. Project Nightfall. Project Reaper. Project Sundial. Each one was more terrible than the last. The council members leaned forward. They had authorized the funding but never knew the details. Now they were seeing what their money had built. Dr. Caroline Foster entered the room. She was the lead scientist for Project Sundial. Her hair was gray and her face was lined with worry. She had not slept since hearing about New Haven. Her father had died in the early wars with hostile aliens. She made sure humanity would never be helpless again. "Is it ready?" the president asked. Caroline nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "Sundial is ready. It has been ready for 5 years. We tested it on uninhabited systems. The results were exactly as predicted. Complete stellar collapse. Everything in the system destroyed." One of the council members spoke up. "Are we really considering this? Destroying an entire star system? That is genocide on a scale never seen before. We would be killing billions of civilians. How are we different from the Krethians then?" President Hayes turned to face him. "We are different because they started this," she said. Her voice was cold. "They killed our people without warning. They murdered children. They committed genocide first. Now they must learn that humanity does not forgive. We do not forget, and we never show mercy to those who slaughter us." Commander Kyle Bennett stepped forward. He ran the Stealth Operations Division. He had a tablet in his hands showing maps and data. "We have been watching the Krethians for years," he said. "We have complete information on their home system. We know where their fleets are. We know their defenses. We can do this." He displayed a map of Krethian space. Their homeworld is called Krathos Prime. 8 billion people live there. They have orbital habitats with another 2 billion. Their entire government and military command are based in that system. If we remove it, their empire falls apart. The council debated for hours. Some argued for conventional warfare. Others wanted diplomatic solutions. But everyone kept coming back to the same question. How do you respond to genocide? How do you make sure it never happens again? Finally, President Hayes called for a vote. The room fell silent. One by one, the council members voted. When it was done, option 0 had been approved. Humanity would respond to genocide with annihilation. The Krethian civilization would end. But first, they needed to buy time. Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council was a man named Martin Cole. He was a skilled diplomat who had kept peace for years. Now he had to play a different game. He had to make everyone think humanity was weak. Martin stood before the Galactic Council and gave his speech. He condemned the attack. He demanded justice. He called for sanctions against the Krethian Empire. Behind his words was carefully controlled anger. He made it look like Earth was seeking diplomatic solutions. The other species listened and offered sympathy. They agreed that the attack was terrible, but they also warned against escalation. War would be costly. Humanity should accept reparations. The Krethians would pay compensation for the deaths. That was how things were done. Martin nodded and thanked them. Inside he felt sick. These species thought human lives could be bought with money. They did not understand that humanity did not negotiate with genocidal monsters. But he smiled and played his part. Every day of diplomacy bought another day of preparation. Meanwhile, far beyond Neptune, something was happening in the dark. A shipyard that officially did not exist was activating. The UEN Phantom Shadow was being prepared for launch. It was a stealth carrier unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Ryan Hughes walked through the ship for the first time. He had been chosen to command this mission. He was young for a captain, but his record was perfect. More importantly, he understood what this mission meant. He was going to kill billions of people. That thought kept him awake at night. The ship's technology was incredible. It used spatial distortion to bend light around itself. No sensor in the known galaxy could detect it. It could travel through enemy space completely invisible. It was the perfect weapon for a secret mission. Ryan met his crew. 200 people had volunteered for this mission. They all knew they might not come back. They all knew what they were going to do. Some had lost family on New Haven. Others just believed it was necessary. All of them carried the weight of what was coming. Dr. Foster came aboard to check the sundial devices. There were 3 of them stored in the cargo bay. Each one looked simple, just a metal sphere about 2 meters across. But inside each sphere was technology that could kill a star. She explained how they worked to Captain Hughes. The devices inject exotic matter into a star's core. This disrupts the fusion process. The star becomes unstable. It begins to collapse. Depending on the star's size, it either becomes a neutron star or a black hole. Either way, everything in the system dies. "How long does it take?" Ryan asked. Caroline checked her notes. "From activation to total collapse, about 48 hours. The star will show signs of instability after 6 hours. By then, it will be too late to stop. The entire system will be destroyed." Ryan looked at the devices. So simple, so small, yet so terrible. He thought about the Crethean homeworld. He thought about the children who lived there. They had not ordered the attack on New Haven, but they would die anyway. That was the price their leaders had chosen. The final preparations took 3 weeks. The ship was loaded with supplies for a long journey. The crew trained on every system. They practiced emergency procedures. They studied maps of Crethean space. Everything had to be perfect. On Earth, the public knew nothing about Option Zero. They only knew that diplomacy was ongoing. The government released statements about seeking justice. The news showed politicians making speeches. Nobody knew that death was already being prepared. The Crethean Empire was celebrating. They had crushed a human colony with ease. Their propaganda claimed it was a great military victory. They said humanity was weak. They said the humans would do nothing but complain to the Galactic Council. They were planning more attacks. Admiral Blake watched the Crethean broadcasts. He saw them laughing about New Haven. He saw them mocking human weakness. He smiled coldly. Let them laugh. Let them celebrate. They would learn the truth soon enough. They would learn that humanity's greatest weapon was patience. Finally, the day came. The Phantom Shadow was ready. The crew was ready. The mission was approved. Captain Hughes sat in his command chair and gave the order. The ship's engines powered up. The stealth systems activated. They began to move away from the hidden shipyard. Ryan looked at the mission clock. 3 weeks to reach Crethean space. 3 weeks to think about what they were going to do. 3 weeks to prepare for the moment when humanity would show the galaxy what real revenge looked like. The journey had begun. The Phantom Shadow moved through hyperspace like a ghost. On the bridge, Captain Ryan Hughes watched the navigation displays. They were taking routes that few ships knew about. Paths through space that humanity had mapped in secret over decades. The Cretheans had no idea these corridors even existed. The crew worked in shifts. They maintained the ship. They checked the weapons. They prepared for what was coming. But mostly they thought. Every person on board knew they were heading towards something terrible. Something that would change them forever. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell was the tactical officer. She had served in the Navy for 12 years. She had fought pirates and raiders. She had defended colonies from attacks. But she had never done anything like this. She had never been part of genocide. Sarah sat in her quarters looking at photos, pictures from New Haven, images of the dead. She had friends who died there. Good people who never hurt anyone. The Cretheans killed them without mercy, without reason. Just murdered them because they could. But Sarah also thought about Krethos Prime. She had studied the planet. It was beautiful. Green oceans and red continents, cities that sparkled in the sunlight. 8 billion people lived there. Most of them were just ordinary citizens. Workers and families. Children going to school. Just like New Haven, she went to find Captain Hughes. He was in his ready room staring at mission reports. Sarah knocked and entered. "Can we talk?" she asked. Ryan nodded and gestured to a chair. He could see the doubt in her eyes. He had the same doubt himself. "Is this right?" Sarah asked. "What we are doing? Killing billions of people who had nothing to do with New Haven. How does that make us better than them? How does that make us the good ones?" Ryan was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know if it is right," he finally said. "I do know that if we do nothing, more humans will die. The Cretheans were planning more attacks. They see us as weak. This is the only language they understand. Overwhelming force, but is that justice or revenge?" Sarah asked. Ryan looked at her directly. "Maybe it is both," he said. "Maybe it has to be. The galaxy needs to know that humanity will protect itself, that we will never accept genocide. If that makes us monsters, then so be it." Sarah left feeling no better than before. The conversation gave her no peace. But she went back to her post. She would do her duty, even if it haunted her for the rest of her life. Because that was what being human meant sometimes, carrying the weight of terrible choices. In the engineering bay, Daniel Price was working on the sundial devices. He checked every circuit. He tested every system. These devices had to work perfectly. There would be no second chance. No do-overs. They had one shot to do this right. Daniel was a scientist before he was a soldier. He understood the physics of what the sundial would do. The exotic matter would destabilize the star's fusion process. The hydrogen burning in the core would become unstable. The star would begin collapsing under its own gravity. The process would take about 2 days from start to finish. First, the star would show increased solar activity, massive flares. radiation bursts. The Crithians would notice something was wrong. They would try to figure out what was happening. But by then it would be too late. Then the real collapse would begin. The star's outer layers would be expelled violently. A wave of superheated plasma expanding outward at incredible speed. Everything in the inner system would be vaporized instantly. Planets, stations, ships, all gone in seconds. The core would keep collapsing, getting denser, getting smaller. Eventually it would become a neutron star, a sphere of matter so dense that a teaspoon would weigh billions of tons. The gravitational forces would tear apart anything that survived the initial blast. Daniel thought about the people who would die. They would not suffer long. The end would be fast, faster than they could process. One moment they would be alive. The next moment they would be plasma. It was a small mercy and an act of ultimate cruelty. The journey continued. Days turned into weeks. The crew settled into routines. They ate together. They exercised. They played games to pass the time. On the surface, everything seemed normal. But underneath was the constant awareness of their mission. They intercepted Crethian communications as they got closer. Broadcasts from their homeworld. News programs. Entertainment shows. Normal civilian life. People talking about their jobs. Parents worried about their children's grades. Just ordinary life. Life that would soon end. But they also intercepted military communications. The Crethian fleet was preparing for another attack. They were targeting a human mining colony. Hundreds of families lived there. The Crethians saw them as easy targets, more humans to kill, more territory to claim. Ryan called a meeting in the briefing room. He showed everyone the intercepted plans. The Crethians were not done. They were just getting started. If the Phantom Shadow turned back now, more humans would die, thousands, maybe millions. The mission became easier to justify. Finally, they reached the edge of Crethian space. The ship's stealth systems were running at maximum. They were completely invisible, undetectable, a ghost sliding through enemy territory. Crethian patrol ships passed right by them without knowing they were there. Commander Kyle Bennett had provided perfect intelligence. His reconnaissance drones had mapped every patrol route, every sensor station, every defensive position. The Phantom Shadow avoided them all. They slipped deeper into Crethian space like a knife sliding between ribs. Then they saw it. The Crethian home system. The star called Krethos burning bright and yellow. 3 planets orbiting peacefully, massive orbital habitats gleaming in the starlight. This was the heart of the Crethian Empire, the center of their civilization. Soon it would be nothing but a grave. Ryan gave the order. Begin deployment procedures. The crew moved to their stations. Daniel and his team prepared the sundial devices for launch. They would place them at 3 points around the star. Precise positions calculated by the best scientists on Earth. The first device launched. A small unmanned craft carried it toward the star. It would take 6 hours to reach the deployment point. 6 hours of waiting. 6 hours of last chances to call this off. But nobody suggested turning back. They had come too far. The second device launched 3 hours later. Then the third. All 3 were moving toward their positions. The Crethians detected nothing. Their sensors saw nothing unusual. Their defense systems raised no alarms. They had no idea that death was surrounding their son. Sarah sat at her station watching the deployment. Her hands were steady on the controls. Inside she was screaming, but outside she remained calm and professional. This was her job. This was her duty. She would see it through to the end. 12 hours after entering the system, all 3 devices were in position. They sat in space around Krethos like invisible executioners, waiting for the signal, waiting for the command that would kill a star. Ryan sat in his command chair and opened a secure channel to Earth. President Hayes was in the Situation Room. Admiral Blake stood beside her. They looked at the screen showing the Phantom Shadow's position. "This is it," Blake said quietly. "Once we give this order, there is no going back. The Crethian civilization ends today." Catherine Hayes thought about New Haven, about the children who died there, about the families torn apart, about the genocide committed against her people. Then she nodded. "Give the order," she said. Ryan received the authorization codes. He entered them into the system. The devices activated. The sundial devices came alive. Deep inside each one, exotic matter began to generate. Particles that should not exist in normal space. Particles that bent the rules of physics. They started moving toward the star at incredible speeds. Invisible, unstoppable. On Krethos Prime, nobody noticed anything wrong. The morning sun rose over the capital city. People went to work. Children played in parks. The sky was clear and blue. It was a beautiful day. The last beautiful day their world would ever see. The exotic matter reached the star's core 6 hours after activation. It began to interfere with the fusion process. Hydrogen atoms were still combining to make helium, but the reaction was becoming unstable. Energy output started to fluctuate. Small changes at first, then bigger. Krethian scientists noticed the anomaly after 8 hours. Solar observatories detected unusual radiation patterns. The star's brightness was changing. Flares were erupting on the surface. Bigger than normal, more violent. The scientists called emergency meetings. They started running models. At first they thought it was natural. Stars sometimes had active periods, but the computer model showed something wrong. This was not normal stellar activity. This was something else, something they had never seen before. The scientists started to worry. On the phantom shadow, the crew watched their instruments. The star's instability was increasing exactly as predicted. Dr. Foster's calculations were perfect. The process had begun and nothing could stop it now. The star was dying and it did not even know it yet. 12 hours after activation, the Krethian government was informed. The solar scientists explained what they were seeing. The star was becoming unstable. They did not know why. They recommended evacuating the inner planets as a precaution. But that would take weeks. Weeks they did not have. Some Krethian scientists suggested sabotage. Maybe an enemy had done something to their star. But that was impossible. Nobody had that technology. Stars were too big, too powerful. You could not just turn off a sun. It was ridiculous. Yet the data said otherwise. Emergency broadcasts went out across the system. All ships were ordered to prepare for evacuation. People were told to stay calm. The government said they were working on the problem, but panic started spreading anyway. Everyone could see the sun acting strange. Everyone knew something terrible was happening. 18 hours after activation, the collapse began. The star's outer layers started expanding. Massive solar flares erupted. Radiation poured out in all directions. The Krethians watched in horror as their sun started to die. Evacuation ships launched, but there were not enough. Not nearly enough. Sarah Mitchell watched from the Phantom Shadows bridge. She saw the star convulsing. She saw the desperate ships trying to escape. She wanted to look away, but she could not. This was her doing. She had helped make this happen. She had to witness it. 20 hours after activation, the star expelled its outer layers. A massive wave of plasma exploded outward. Moving at millions of miles per hour, the innermost planet was hit first. It vaporized in seconds, just gone, turned to atoms. 8 billion Krethians died instantly. The wave kept expanding. It hit the orbital habitats next. Massive stations that housed billions more. They had no time to react, no time to escape. The plasma wave washed over them like they were made of paper. More billions dead, just like that. In the blink of an eye, the evacuation ships that had launched were caught in the blast. They tried to jump to hyperspace, but the gravitational distortions prevented it. They could not escape. The plasma overtook them one by one. Families died together, holding each other, praying. But there were no gods listening today. The second planet suffered the same fate. Then the third. The entire inner system was sterilized in minutes. Everything that lived was now dead. Everything that stood was now vapor. The Krethian home system had become a crematorium burning at 1,000,000 degrees. Behind the expanding death, the star continued to collapse. Its core was compressing, getting smaller, getting denser. The fusion process had completely stopped. Now it was just gravity, pure crushing gravity pulling everything inward, creating something new and terrible. Daniel Price monitored the readings. The collapse was proceeding perfectly. In about 30 more hours, the star would finish becoming a neutron star, a ball of matter so dense it would warp space around it. The remaining planets would be torn apart by tidal forces. Captain Hughes opened a communication channel. He broadcast on all Krethian frequencies. His message was simple and cold. You attacked New Haven. You killed our people. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. This is what happens when you commit genocide against humanity. Remember us. The message was heard across Krethian space. Every colony, every ship, every outpost. They received it and understood what it meant. Earth had responded. Not with diplomacy, not with conventional war, with absolute annihilation. The humans had killed their star. The Krethian military fleet was approaching Earth when they got the news. 300 warships ready to attack humanity's homeworld. Their commanders received telemetry from the home system. They watched the recordings of their sun dying. They saw their civilization ending. The fleet stopped. Complete confusion spread through the ranks. How was this possible? How had the humans done this? They were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be easy prey. But they had just erased an entire star system like it was nothing. Admiral Blake was waiting for them. His fleet surrounded the Krethian ships. He broadcast a message to every Krethian vessel. You have seen what we did to your homeworld. That is the price of genocide. Now you have a choice: surrender and face justice, or die here like your people died there. The Krethian fleet surrendered within the hour. Every ship, every soldier. They had lost everything. Their government was gone. Their military command was dead. Their homeworld was destroyed. They had no fight left, no reason to fight. They had already lost the war. Back in the Krethian home system, the final collapse was happening. The neutron star formed in the center where Krethos used to be. It spun rapidly, shooting beams of radiation into space. The remaining outer planets were breaking apart. Gravity was tearing them to pieces. The phantom shadow recorded everything. Every moment. Every death. The complete destruction of an entire civilization. Captain Hughes made sure the footage was perfect. This would be sent to every species in the galaxy. A warning. A promise. Touch humanity and this is what happens. Sarah sat at her station with tears running down her face. She had done her duty. She had helped kill billions. She told herself it was necessary. She told herself they deserved it. But the guilt was crushing her. She would carry this weight forever. Daniel looked at his instruments one last time. The mission was complete. The sundial had worked exactly as designed. He had created the ultimate weapon and proven it worked. He felt sick. He had dreamed of being a great scientist. Now he was just a mass murderer with a degree. Ryan gave the order to leave. The phantom shadow turned away from the dying system. They jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, the neutron star continued spinning. A tombstone marking where the Krethian civilization used to be. 10 billion dead. An entire species broken. The journey back to Earth was quiet. Nobody celebrated. Nobody felt victorious. They had won, but the victory tasted like ashes. They had saved humanity by becoming monsters. They had prevented future genocide by committing their own. The moral calculus did not balance. News of the destruction reached the galactic community within days. Every species received the footage. They saw the star dying. They saw the planets destroyed. They saw the complete erasure of the Krethian civilization. The galaxy fell silent in shock and fear. Humanity had been underestimated. They were newcomers to galactic society, young and primitive compared to ancient civilizations, but they had just demonstrated technology that nobody else possessed. They had killed a star. That changed everything. That changed how every species viewed humans. The war was over before it really began. The Krethian Empire dissolved. The surviving colonies surrendered. The military leadership faced war crimes trials. But the real message was sent to everyone else. To every species that might consider aggression against humanity. The message was clear and terrible. Touch humanity and we will erase you from existence. Not just defeat you. Not just conquer you. We will make it so you never existed. Your planets will die. Your stars will die. Your history will end. This is not a threat. This is a promise. We have shown we can do it. We will do it again if necessary. President Catherine Hayes stood before the Galactic Council. Every species representative was present. The chamber was packed. Nobody wanted to miss this. The entire galaxy wanted to hear what humanity would say about destroying an entire star system. Catherine looked at the assembled aliens. Some looked afraid. Others looked angry. A few looked impressed. She began speaking. Her voice was calm and clear. She did not apologize. She did not ask for understanding. She simply stated facts. The Krethian Empire committed genocide against New Haven. They murdered 2.3 million human civilians, men, women, and children. They did this without provocation, without warning. They did it because they believed humanity was weak. We responded by eliminating their civilization, completely, totally. We did this to send a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity will not tolerate genocide. Any species that commit such acts against us will face absolute annihilation. This is not negotiable. This is not subject to debate. The chamber erupted. Aliens were shouting. Some demanded that Earth be sanctioned. Others called for military action against humanity. A few species quietly decided that humans made better allies than enemies. Catherine waited for silence. Then she continued. We seek peace and cooperation with all species. We want to be good neighbors. We want to trade and share knowledge. But understand this clearly. If you attack human populations, if you commit genocide against us, we will erase you, your planets, your systems, your entire civilization. Gone. A representative from an old and powerful species stood up. You claim to seek peace while threatening genocide. How are you different from the Krethians? How are you not the monsters in the story? Catherine looked at him directly. We are different because we did not start this. We did not attack them. We responded to their actions. They chose violence. They chose genocide. We simply showed them the consequences of that choice. The difference is clear to anyone honest enough to see it. The council session ended with no resolution. Some species cut diplomatic ties with Earth. Others strengthened their relationships. Several aggressive civilizations that had been expanding through conquest suddenly became peaceful. They had received the message loud and clear. Back on Earth, the population was divided. Some celebrated the victory. They held parades for the Phantom Shadows crew. They called them heroes who had saved humanity. Others protested. They carried signs condemning the genocide. They called for trials and justice. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell became one of the most vocal critics. She gave interviews explaining what she had done. She described watching billions die. She said it haunted her every night. She argued that humanity had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But she also admitted something else. Since the destruction of Krethos, not a single human colony had been attacked. Not one. Several species that had been making threats suddenly became friendly. Trade agreements were signed. Defense pacts were offered. Fear had brought peace. Amy Morgan was 16 years old now. 8 years had passed since New Haven. She had grown up in refugee camps and temporary housing. She had lost her mother and her home. But she had survived. And she had decided what she wanted to do with her life. She was studying interstellar diplomacy. She wanted to help prevent wars. She wanted to build bridges between species. She believed that what happened to Krethos should never happen again. Not to any species. Not even to enemies. There had to be a better way. Amy attended the memorial dedication ceremony for New Haven. A massive monument was built listing every name. 2.3 million names carved in stone. She walked along the walls reading them. So many names. So many lives. All gone because of hate and violence. At the ceremony, she met an old Krethian named Velk. He was one of the survivors from the colonies. He had lost his entire family when Krethos died. His children. His grandchildren. Everyone he loved. All dead in an instant. He looked at Amy and saw the same pain in her eyes. They talked for a long time. Two orphans of war trying to make sense of it all. Velk said he understood why Earth responded the way they did. He said his government was wrong to attack New Haven, but he also said the innocent should not pay for the crimes of leaders. Amy agreed. She said her mother would have wanted peace. She said that revenge did not bring anyone back. It only created more orphans, more pain, more reasons for the next war. They needed to break the cycle. Someone had to be brave enough to choose peace. Dr. Caroline Foster retired from weapons research. She moved to a quiet farm far from any cities. She spent her days growing vegetables and trying to forget what she had created. But at night the dreams came. Dreams of dying stars. Dreams of billions screaming. She could never forget. Captain Ryan Hughes was promoted to admiral. He commanded the defense of human space now. People called him a hero. They said he saved humanity. But he knew the truth. He was not a hero. He was just a man who followed orders. Orders that killed more people than any weapon in history. He tried to be a good officer. He trained his people well. He made sure defenses were strong. He worked hard every day, but he could not escape the nightmares. The star collapsing, the planets dying, the ships trying to escape. All those people, all those deaths. His responsibility. The surviving Krethians were scattered across dozens of colonies. Maybe 40 million of them left. Their empire was gone. Their government dissolved. They lived under supervision from the Galactic Council. Some humans wanted them completely eliminated. Others wanted reconciliation. War crimes trials were held. The Krethian military commanders who ordered the attack on New Haven were prosecuted. They were found guilty and executed. Justice was served in that small way, but it did not bring anyone back. It did not undo what had been done. Earth established new colonies. This time nobody threatened them. Nobody dared. The new settlements prospered and grew. Trade flourished. Humanity expanded across the stars, and everywhere they went, other species treated them with respect and fear. Admiral Henry Blake stood on the observation deck of the defense station orbiting New Hope. The colony was built near where New Haven used to be. A memorial. A promise. He watched children playing in the settlement below, safe, protected. Alive because of what was done at Krethos. A young officer approached him. Sir, was it worth it? Was destroying their entire civilization the right thing to do? Blake was quiet for a long time. He thought about all the arguments, all the debates, all the moral questions that had no good answers. I do not know if it was right, he finally said. I do know that no human colony has been attacked since then. I know that our people are safe. We paid a terrible price for that safety. 10 billion deaths. That weight never leaves you. But those children down there get to live. The young officer nodded and walked away. Blake turned back to the window. He thought about the cost of peace, the price paid in blood and fire, the moral compromises made in the name of survival. He wondered if future generations would judge them harshly. Probably they would. History was rarely kind to those who committed genocide, even when done in response to genocide, but he also knew that those future generations would exist because of what was done. They would live because the Krethian civilization died. Across the galaxy, species watched humanity carefully. Some with admiration, others with fear, all with respect. Earth had proven it could defend itself. More than that, it had proven it would go to any length to protect its people. Any length at all. The memory of Krethos became legend. Parents told their children about it. Teachers taught it in schools. The day humanity killed a star. The day an entire civilization ended because they attacked the wrong species. It was a warning that would echo through history. Peace came to human space, not because of diplomacy or goodwill, but because of overwhelming demonstration of force, because every potential enemy knew what would happen if they attacked. The peace was built on fear and death. But it was peace nonetheless. The galaxy learned its lesson. Humanity was not weak. They were not to be trifled with. They had shown mercy for years. They had tried diplomacy. They had sought peaceful solutions. But when pushed too far, they revealed what they truly were. Survivors at any cost. 10 years had passed since the destruction of Krethos. The galaxy had changed in ways nobody expected. Humanity had gone from being newcomers to being one of the most feared civilizations in known space. Not because of military might alone, but because everyone knew what humans were capable of. Earth had 30 colonies now, each one prosperous and growing. Trade networks connected human space with dozens of alien civilizations. Technology was shared. Culture was exchanged. On the surface, everything looked peaceful and cooperative. But underneath was the constant awareness of what happened when you crossed humanity. Amy Morgan was 26 years old now. She had finished her studies and become a diplomat. She worked for the Galactic Council helping resolve conflicts between species. She was good at her job. People trusted her, maybe because she understood loss, maybe because she genuinely wanted peace. She was assigned to help resettle the remaining Krethians. They were still scattered and struggling. Their species had been broken but not destroyed. They needed help rebuilding. Many humans opposed helping them. Why should we help the species that tried to exterminate us? But Amy saw things differently. The Krethians who survived were not the ones who attacked New Haven. Most of them had nothing to do with that decision. They were just ordinary people who lost everything because of their government's actions. Just like she lost everything because of the same government. She worked with Velk often now. The old Krethian had become a leader among his people. He advocated for peace and reconciliation. He taught young Krethians about what happened, about why it happened, about how hate and violence only led to more destruction. Together they traveled to different worlds. They spoke at universities and conferences, a human orphan and a Krethian survivor sharing a stage, telling their stories, showing that peace was possible even after unimaginable tragedy. It was slow work, but it mattered. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had left the military. She could not continue serving after what she did. She became a teacher instead. She taught history and ethics at a university on Earth. She made sure her students knew the truth about Krethos, all of it, the good and the bad. She told them about New Haven, about the genocide, about the children who died there. Then she told them about Krethos, about the star dying, about the billions who had nothing to do with the attack but died anyway. She made them grapple with the moral complexity. Was it justified, she would ask her students. Was it necessary? Could we have done something else? The debates were fierce. Some students argued it was the only option. Others said it was evil. Sarah never told them what to think. She just made them think. Admiral Ryan Hughes still commanded the Defense Forces. He was older now, gray hair and tired eyes. He had not slept well in 10 years. The nightmares never stopped. But he continued doing his duty, because someone had to protect humanity. Someone had to carry the burden. He met with Amy occasionally. She would come to him asking for military support for peacekeeping missions. He would approve what he could. They had an understanding. She was trying to build a better future. He was trying to prevent the past from repeating. Both were necessary. One day Amy brought Velk to meet Ryan. The old Krethian and the human admiral sat across from each other. Two men who had lost everything in the same war. Two men who represented opposite sides of an old conflict. They talked for hours. "I am sorry for what my people did," Velk said. "The attack on New Haven was evil. It should never have happened. My government made a terrible choice, one that destroyed both our civilizations. I wish I could undo it." Ryan looked at him for a long time. "I am sorry too," he finally said. "Sorry that we responded the way we did. Sorry that your family died for crimes they did not commit. Sorry that I pushed the button that killed your world. I carry that every day." They shook hands. It did not fix anything. It did not bring anyone back. But it was a start, a small gesture toward something better, proof that even after the worst horrors, reconciliation was possible. Not easy, not quick, but possible. The galaxy watched humanity carefully. New species were making contact. Young civilizations just discovering space travel. They all heard the stories about Earth, about the species that killed a star. The stories varied. Some made humans sound like heroes. Others made them sound like demons. Earth's diplomats worked hard to present a balanced image. Yes, we are capable of extreme violence, but we prefer peace. Yes, we destroyed the Krethian civilization, but only in response to genocide against us. We are not monsters, but we are not to be trifled with either. Some species formed strong alliances with humanity. They saw the value in having Earth as a friend. Others kept their distance. They did not want to be associated with a civilization capable of such destruction. Both reactions were understandable. Both were based on fear. President Hayes had stepped down years ago. The new president was a younger woman named Patricia Wells. She had campaigned on building bridges and healing wounds. She supported Amy's reconciliation efforts. She believed humanity needed to show it could be more than its worst moment, but she also kept the military strong. The sundial weapons remained ready. New defenses were built, because she understood the reality. Peace through strength was not ideal, but it worked. As long as potential enemies feared what humanity could do, they would think twice before attacking. On the anniversary of the Krethos destruction, Earth held a day of remembrance. Not celebration, remembrance. They remembered the victims of New Haven. They also remembered the billions who died on Krethos. Both were tragedies. Both deserved to be mourned. Amy spoke at the ceremony. She talked about her mother, about watching New Haven die, about growing up hating the Krethians, then about learning that hate only created more victims, about choosing to build instead of destroy, about honoring the dead by creating a better future. Velk spoke too. He talked about his family, about the day Krethos died, about the pain and anger, then about meeting Amy and learning about New Haven, about understanding that both sides suffered, about choosing forgiveness even when it felt impossible. Not everyone was happy with the ceremony. Some humans thought it was disrespectful to mourn the Krethians. Some Krethians thought it was insulting to share the stage with humans. But most people understood. War created victims on all sides. Recognizing that was not weakness, it was wisdom. Admiral Blake was very old now, almost 80. He rarely left his home, but he watched the ceremony on television. He saw Amy and Velk speaking together. He saw the crowd listening. He saw hope for something better. It made him cry. He had carried the weight of that decision for 10 years. He had ordered the destruction of an entire civilization. He had done it to save humanity. But the cost haunted him. Seeing young people choosing peace instead of revenge gave him something he had not felt in years. Hope. Dr. Caroline Foster had died 2 years earlier. She lived her final years in peace on her farm. She never spoke publicly about Sundial again, but she left behind journals, writings about the moral burden of creating weapons of mass destruction, about the responsibility scientists had. Her journals were published after her death. They became required reading at universities across human space. Young scientists learned about the ethical implications of their work, about how knowledge could be used for good or evil, about how sometimes the greatest discoveries carried the heaviest burdens. The galaxy continued turning. New conflicts arose, new challenges appeared. But the memory of Krethos remained, a warning, a lesson, a reminder of what could happen when hate and fear controlled decisions. Both sides learned from it. Both sides tried to be better. Humanity spread further into space. New colonies on new worlds, meeting new species, building new relationships, always carrying the reputation earned at Krethos, capable of extreme violence, but choosing peace when possible, strong enough to destroy, wise enough to build instead. Years became decades. The generation that witnessed Krethos grew old. New generations came up who only knew the stories. The pain faded, but the lessons remained. History books taught what happened, why it happened, what it cost, so it would never be forgotten. Amy and Velk continued their work until they were too old to travel. Then they wrote books together, a human and a Krethian telling the story from both perspectives, showing how tragedy could lead to understanding, how enemies could become friends, how peace was always possible if people chose it. The Phantom Shadow was turned into a museum. People walked through its corridors, saw the command center, learned about the mission. Some visitors called the crew heroes, others called them war criminals. Most just felt sad about the whole thing, about the necessity of such terrible choices. In the end, the destruction of Krethos became a turning point, not because it ended war. War continued, but because it changed how species approached conflict. Genocide became unthinkable, not because of morality alone, but because humanity proved they would respond with total annihilation. It was a dark kind of peace, built on fear and the memory of billions dead, not the peace anyone wanted. But it worked. Human colonies thrived, trade flourished, cooperation increased, all because every species knew what would happen if they crossed the line. The galaxy learned to respect humanity. Not love, not trust completely, but respect, because humans had shown they would go further than anyone else to protect.